This is Grafted Together with ACSI Chief Ministry Officer Jerry Nelson.
Many English words instantly evoke emotions like death, taxes, or jury duty. In our modern era, words like conservative, progressive, woke, cancel culture, DEI, patriotism, nationalism, or globalism have become charged as well. There are words also prevalent in education, from standardized tests to parent-teacher conferences or meetings, or to faculty meetings. However, I actually think that there's one word that may take the prize on emotional responses: accreditation. And this is regardless of level. For some, it brings anxiety and trepidation, like an unexpected inspection with fines, accompanied by fines and threats. But for others, it's really a welcome invitation to collaborate with peer Christian educators and really seek out ways to improve their school. But I think we all would agree that the Christian school accreditation process should be fundamentally different. It should be biblically centered, building up, encouraging, and admonishing in a loving manner, inspiring the school to achieve God's call. So, what is a biblically centered view of accreditation? I'm reminded of what Paul said to the Colossian church. He says to take every thought captive. And so I believe this applies to everything that we do within the Christian school space, and this includes accreditation. So what if we refocused our mind and began to think about accreditation as biblical stewardship? And so the scriptures teach us that stewardship is not ownership. It's the responsibility of those entrusted with resources to really multiply what God has given them. And so in the story of the talents, the master entrusts three individuals with a portion of his wealth before embarking on a journey. They are expected to provide an account of what they earned upon the master's return. The master is coming back to assess whether they have been good stewards. Now, the parable clearly conveys the master's expectation of a return on investment. He expects them to utilize their gifts and to grow them. And we know from the story that the first two servants doubled their portion, while the third, with the smallest initial amount, failed to yield any return. Unfortunately, the master scolded the third servant for not even putting the money in the bank at all. And so in response to the third servant's lack of stewardship, he gave that single portion to the third servant. Now, of course, you're asking, well, how does this apply to accreditation? Well, hi, my name is Jerry Nelson, and this is Grafted Together. I want to remind you that spiritual formation matters. It is what makes Christian education. And if you're not a part of the growing spiritual formation network, you are missing out. In our last meeting, we had Dr. Tim Van Solen walk us through strategies on how to assess spiritual formation. We actually began back in September with Dr. Annie Gallagher, who talked to us and shared with us strategies on developing expected student outcomes, or a portrait of a graduate. Well, coming up February 3rd, we have Dr. Roger Erdveg from the Center for Biblical Worldview Formation at Summit Ministries. He'll join us to walk us through the next phase of our spiritual formation journey map on how to equip teachers and leaders in spiritual formation and biblical worldview formation. So to register for the Spiritual Formation Network meeting, you can sign up at acsi.org/convene. That is acsi.org/convene, and look for the Spiritual Formation Network. Get registered today to connect with spiritual formation ambassadors literally from around the world and receive regular updates on upcoming training and networking opportunities. Again, that is acsi.org/convene. So joining me today to talk about this concept of accreditation as biblical stewardship is Stephen Deck, who currently serves as ACSI's Vice President of Education Standards, where he oversees ACSI's accreditation, not just here in the United States, but around the world, and credentialing teams. And so during his time at ACSI, Stephen has chaired numerous accreditation visits served as the liaison between ACSI and partnering accrediting agencies, and played a pivotal role in the revision of ACSI's accreditation protocol, currently Inspire. And prior to his time at ACSI, Stephen taught in an ACSI accredited school. Stephen holds a Bachelor's of Science degree in music education. Oh, I love my friends who are musicians. A Master's of Arts degree in ministry, a Master's of Education degree in educational leadership, and an educational specialist degree in education leadership. But probably Stephen's most amazing accomplishment is he is married to his wonderful wife, Gina, who I've had an opportunity to spend some time with, and they have 10 wonderful kids together.
Yeah,
How in the world, Stephen, first of all,
sure.
how in the world do you get that done? I think that's forget about accreditation as biblical stewardship. Man, how are you being a good steward at home, man?
Well, listen, it's 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 um it's teamwork, it's partnership. It's I've got, like you mentioned, I've got an amazing wife, and you just dive in and you get it done. Actually, in all seriousness, transitioning here. I remember when we brought the first set of twins home from the hospital. So we had our son, and then we had our first set of twins, and I was sitting in the living room of our tiny little two-bedroom townhouse, and all three of them were crying. And I sit at the table, and I'm like, the thought I had was, is this how it's going to be? All of the crying and chaos? And the answer is yes. Sometimes that's how it's going to be. But to transition to your focus on biblical stewardship, I've been we were corresponding a little bit before the recording, and when you sent the email and you mentioned your biblical stewardship emphasis, and then the intro about the talents and stewardship, not as ownership but as management, and multiplying what God's given you, that hit me like a ton of bricks, because our pastor at the local church on Sunday talked about this concept. A podcast I've been listening to talked about this concept. But one of the points brought up was about Esther. And such a time as this, you were placed
Mm.
here in this position for such a time as this. So how are you going to steward this situation that God put you in? And that's kind of how you have to approach each day. Is this is the time and place and the position where God has put me, and how am I, and then we together as a couple, going to steward this time management where God has placed us at this time? And so you do it. It really is one day at a time, and then you make it work.
I wonder if we should have retitled this as accreditation like parenting. It's absolutely chaotic, but long as you have the goal in mind, and
Oh, I don't know. I'm sure that breaks down somewhere, but maybe so.
awesome. One of the things I've been intrigued about, and of course, you and your team, you guys have been on the front lines, and just for our listeners, I've just really been inspired by the work that your team is doing. I'm not saying that because I work for ACSI. I'm saying it because I really get to see it up front. Just really inspired by the diligence and the care and the desire to really serve our constituents, our member schools, particularly our member schools who are engaging in the accreditation process. But what we are seeing is an uptick in the desire for schools to get accredited for various reasons.
Sure.
And so you have a lot of new schools that are starting. You have a lot of folks who are coming into the realm of education who don't have any educational experience. They heard of accreditation. They have some ideas of what it is. But I'd love for you to just kind of unpack just really quickly, just kind of assuming that our listeners, there's some listeners who would engage with this, who who need an accurate or an expert's understanding of what the accreditation process is before we kind of launch into the whole biblical stewardship connection.
Well, that's great. That's great. Our focus with accreditation truly is school improvement, overall comprehensive school improvement. And so you mentioned our current protocol, our Inspire protocol. Several years ago, when we launched the revision process, to update our protocol, transition from the REACH protocol to the INSPIRE protocol. We were intentional about a couple of things. One of the things that we were intentional about, which we'll get into later, is the biblical basis for
Mm.
each of our standards. And then another thing we are intentional about that I'll address at this time is changing the mindset from a compliance or checklist based mindset of accreditation, inspector model.
Mm.
Are you meeting the standard, to truly collaborative, reflective school improvement. And we were intentional about that in the way we wrote the standards and indicators, in the way we conducted our training, in the way we revised some of our processes. And it was a group effort. It was a big team, and I got to play a small role in that, the early parts of the revision, and then Dr. Wilcox was leading the department at the time and led the charge, and then eventually on the tail end of that, I got to kind of take over and finish things up. But I remember there were all the accreditation directors at the time, global commissioners, divisional commissioners, additional guests that we invited in to speak into the
Mm.
process. So we wanted it to be we wanted wide input into the process,
Yeah.
and we got it. But one of the things we did when developing the training is just as an icebreaker activity with the accreditation directors. I had them all share stories of their best accreditation experiences and their worst accreditation experiences. And as they were sharing, it was supposed to just be fun activity to get us started in the day, but I was starting to connect the dots that the best experiences happened when the school and the team all understood the purpose of the process together, of
Mm.
school improvement. We're coming together to work together to help this school be the best that they can be, in line with their mission. But along with an established set of standards, there are still things the school needs to meet, but we're working together to propel the school along. Contrast that with a lot of the worst experiences. I mean, there were some mishaps on visits and things like that, but but overall, the general theme of some of the experience that weren't as good is when the school or the team did not understand the process. They either viewed the team as inspectors, or they were a little bit defensive about some of the things they did,
Mhm.
or the team members didn't understand, and so saw themselves as really coming in, to really in on the school. And so really the perspective there, of both the school and the team, is important. And so that is our goal with the accreditation process, is it gives you an opportunity to conduct a comprehensive self-evaluation with
Mhm.
all stakeholder groups involved. You get board members involved, administration, teachers, staff members, parents, even students involved in taking a real assessment of where you are as a school, reflecting on that, analyzing that, creating goals for improvement, and then the team can come in and collaborate with you around those goals. And that's out of that process, you can craft that improvement plan for, hey, how can we be a better school at the end of this accreditation cycle than we were at the beginning? That's our goal with the accreditation process.
It reminds me of, I believe it's Amos 3:3.
Mm,
How can two walk together lest they agree? And Stephen, we've had a lot of conversations on this, but that is really a new insight,
mm,
to me, just really spending time, the value of spending time for the accreditation team and the school. And I know it starts with the person
mm.
who's chairing the visit, to really get on the same page in terms of, okay, what are we doing here? Why are we
Yeah.
doing this? And really establishing from the beginning that, this is not meant to be, just kind of a white glove. We're just going to put on our white gloves and we're going to search for dust under, every process. And I would even say, even kind of reflecting on the REACH protocol, which was very, very compliance based. In fact, I had shared with you that uh, I had begun to organize my files in my office as a head of school according to the 10 REACH standards, because I did not want to get behind at
Mm,
all in the work that I was doing. I didn't want to get caught having to scramble at the last minute. But I do remember us having really good experiences
Hmm.
with our team chairs, and regardless of the instrument itself, it really the difference really was made with the team chair and how they positioned and how they postured themselves, and then how we thought about the process as well. And of course, you guys have made several improvements, over the years, and again, more. You've aligned it with the flourishing school
Hmm.
culture model, which is cool, and we can talk about that a little bit later. But I want to pivot really quickly to the whole stewardship aspect, and you touched on this really briefly with, kind of the school kind of understanding that, hey, listen, even if I am the founder of the school, the goal is for the school to live on past me, or even if I'm taking over from the founder, or even if the school's 100 years old and all I see is a picture of the founder,
Yeah.
in the atrium, I still hold a particular responsibility in where I am at that moment in time. And ultimately, I have to be accountable to God. So, kind of unpack that for us as you see it, this whole idea, stewardship as it relates to accreditation.
No, that's great. So in the intro, when talking about my family, I kind of started touching on this, what I was thinking about sharing for this portion anyway. But stewardship. I've been thinking around that concept for the past couple of days now. It started with a particular pastor I listened to on a podcast, and
Mhm.
his beginning of the year series has been on stewardship, and then the pastor locally spoke about stewardship this past Sunday, and from a different angle. And then Jerry, when I got your email, I was thinking, um, okay, that's now three sources in the past week that have spoken into my life on the concept of stewardship. I'm really trying to wrestle with this concept now and think through it, and how does it apply to my daily life, whether it's family life, and then professional life, but then also the concept of accreditation. And yeah, just several of those concepts are, as a steward, you're a manager, not an owner. And your job as manager is to run the process well on behalf of the owner, but then also multiply what you've been given. So the parable of the talents illustrates that. But even all the way back in the Garden of Eden, where the command was given, be fruitful and
Mm.
multiply,
That's good.
does not just apply to having children. It's multiply what God has given you in this place where you are. And then uh, Queen Esther, for such a time as this. If you look at the 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 first couple of chapters of Esther, it's just riddled with um, I like to say just so happens, when I really mean God sovereignly ordained, but it just so happened Esther was in the right place at the right time.
Mhm.
Just so happened at the end of chapter 2, Mordecai was in the right place at the right time, in the king's gate. So the book of Esther is riddled with just so happened, people are in the right place at the right time, and then they did the right thing in the environment where they
That's
were. And
good.
so then, from an accreditation perspective, um, two avenues with that, two threads with that. Um, Number one is our goal is to help you as a school grow. And I
Mhm.
don't mean necessarily numerically with enrollment, or budget or revenue.
Mhm.
Although that is a worthy goal for
Mhm.
a lot of schools, depending on the situation they're in. What I mean is grow in breadth and depth, get better. How can we improve what we're doing? How can our teachers be more grounded in the Word of God and better practitioners? And integrating the two, helping students integrate their minds, biblically speaking, with the subject area.
Mhm.
How can I be a better leader in a Christian school? How can I
Mhm.
help my students be the best they can be? How can we improve our processes and programs that benefit the entire community, like true growth? We want to help you as a school grow in that concept, the be fruitful and multiply aspect. But then the other aspect is helping you have the systems and structures in place to best take advantage of the time and place where God has put you to serve so that you can serve the best that you can, within a, and so that's what our accreditation tool is. It's a
Hmm.
research-based and biblically based
Hmm.
accreditation process that shows, okay, these are indicators of a quality Christian school, and we're trying to help you do that, help you be that, so that you can fulfill this calling of Christian education to the best of your ability.
You know, I think one of the things that I've been intrigued by the process, again, being, I would say, immersed in it for uh, really the entire time I've been in Christian education
Mhm.
is, again, kind of back to the whole stewardship thing. God judged each of those servants based on what he gave them.
Mhm.
Even though there was a universal standard that was expected, it's like, yeah, man, you need to multiply this thing, return on investment. He dealt with them individually. And so speak to a little bit about how you approach each school. I know that it's you deal with the school with where they are. You have these standards coming in, but you deal with the school according to what their mission is. Not
Mhm.
you're not comparing that school to another school. Talk about that a little bit and how you and add to that how you talk to your chairs and train them as it relates to that.
Oh, that's a great point, Jerry. That's a great point. And so you're right. It's where are you as a school? That's where we try to come in the accreditation process is meet you where you are as a school. And then how can you improve in your area? Um, we well, I think that's one of the positive aspects of ACSI is
Hmm.
the wide range of types of schools that we have that are part of ACSI. And we've got some of the most prestigious, Christian schools in the country or in the world that are part of ACSI, and they're doing great godly biblical education with those students, and it's awesome to see because they're pouring into the lives of their students, they're pouring into other Christian schools and other
Hmm.
ministries in their community, and God's blessed them with the resources to do so. We have other schools who God has placed them in a certain area where that's just not going to be possible for them to function in that same way, but
Hmm.
they are doing an awesome job of, of
Yeah,
of educating the children that God has placed in those schools from a biblical perspective. And
yeah.
that's why our accreditation protocol, yes, there are standards that the school has to meet, but um, anywhere that we can, we're not prescriptive in how that the school meets it. And so we do try to focus on the school's own mission. Like, what is your own mission for
Yeah.
first? You got to have your mission in place, and then we focus on the school's own mission and what have you done with that? How does that permeate every aspect of your program? And then do you have the systems and structures and
Yeah.
processes in place in order to bolster all of that? What are you doing with what God has given you? And
Hmm.
and I think that's the goal of our accreditation process in as much as we can and anywhere we can, specifically when accreditation, the idea is not to let resources be the hindrance in meeting
That's good.
a standard.
Yeah.
It's like, no, you can have solid curriculum documentation in place that's thoroughly biblically integrated, and it's a living document, and it's carried out in the classrooms, and the teachers are implementing that daily with fidelity, and the teachers are well trained. It doesn't mean you have to have the best technology to support all of that, or the latest pieces. It's appropriate for your context. That's just one example that just came to mind as I was
Yeah.
talking. So that's what we try to do in our accreditation process.
Yeah, no, that's super helpful. I just again, I remember my time as a head of school, in a urban setting, not super. We were not. We had resources, but I would say comparatively, we didn't have, maybe the resources that some other schools, had, and I remember that our mentality as a school was always, hey, listen, this is what God has given us. God's going to hold us accountable for what he's given us. He's not going to hold us accountable for what he hasn't given us because he does, obviously, for whatever reason, he just doesn't want us to have this right now. And so, what I hear, Stephen, and maybe this is an encouragement to those who are in the middle of the accreditation process, those who are considering the accreditation process, or maybe those who just finished the accreditation process, that, it's really about being faithful in the moment with what God has given you, and knowing that, a part of the accreditation process, as we said at the beginning, is to have your peers come alongside you and, spur you on, and to help you even see some blind spots. Because sometimes when you're in the middle of your own school, there's stuff that you miss. It's not it and but also things that you might not even commend yourself for. You don't have the perspective of whether you're just really knocking that out of the park or this is just the way that we do business. So I think that's a super encouragement to our school leaders to embrace this process from a biblical standpoint, and because ultimately it's the Lord who is gonna take stock in our faithfulness in the moment. I think that's the word that's coming to my mind. Like, are we being faithful
Faithful.
with what God has given us?
Yeah. Well, and then I like the direction you started to head there in the middle of that comment because if we're talking about the biblical basis of ACSI accreditation, or what should set a Christian accrediting agency apart from another accrediting agency. I've got two themes and three verses that back up those themes when I am giving an introduction and starting an overview of our accreditation process or training on our
Hmm.
accreditation process. Although earlier you pulled out that Amos 3:3, so you put another tool in my tool bag with that one. But one of them that I use is Ecclesiastes 4, 9, and 10, where it says,
Mm,
two are better than one because they have a good
mhm.
reward for their toil. For if
That's
they
good.
fall, one will lift up his fellow, but woe to him who is alone when he falls and has not another to lift him up. And then
I
the
like
other
that.
verse along those lines is Hebrews 10, 24 to 25. Let us consider how to stir up one another to love and good works, not
Hmm.
neglecting to meet together, as is the habit of some, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day drawing near. And we know that Hebrews was written in specific context to specific people, but the concept, I think, about considering how to stir up one another to love and good
Hmm.
works, and then two are better than one, sharing the burden there is one of the ways that I view the accreditation process, because you can take the school improvement principles in our accreditation protocol, or in our global core standards at ACSI, or in any other accreditation protocol. You can read the protocol, you can take some of those concepts and implement them in your school on your own. And that's just fine to do. I think you'll be better for it. However, however, I think that it really starts to take hold when you have that peer collaboration of someone coming
Yeah.
out to say to come alongside you.
Yeah.
Specifically in our process, they're a peer Christian educator. They are brother or sister in Christ, to come alongside you, to help you look at your own school with a new lens, to talk
Yeah.
with you, collaborate with you about areas for improvement. And then I'm glad you mentioned those areas you're doing really well that you might not see, you might not think you're doing well. And what an encouragement, when I get to come into a school and we as a team get to come and affirm a school, and we're like, it's happened before where a school put a certain concept as an area for improvement for them. They put it as a goal for improvement. And all of us as a team are sitting back and we're thinking, no, you should be telling other schools how you do this. You're actually doing really well. I'm glad you want to improve this area, and by all means keep working on it. But could you tell us how you did that? Could you give us advice on how you're doing that? And so you get the opportunity to affirm them. And so that's kind of one theme that I use in that biblical perspective of brothers and sisters in Christ working together, stirring up one another to love
Mhm.
and good works, coming alongside, bearing one another's burdens, I guess, if I wanted to throw another scripture in
Yeah.
there, with peer Christian educators.
One thing that it didn't make it in our notes, but it just popped in my head based on what you said, uh, is the positive experience, not just in terms of the relationships that the visiting team builds with the school, but also the visiting team and those individual members learn so much.
Hmm.
And it's like there's so many great takeaways. It's like, oh man, I didn't really think about doing something this particular way. And I would tell you that's one of the things that I loved about going on an accreditation visit. You really got to see underneath the hood of a school, and you really got to see some of those things that were working, really positively. And so there was a positive experience for the visiting team members as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, some have said that serving on an accreditation team is some of the best professional development that you'll get
Yeah.
because you're collaborating with your team, you're collaborating with the school, you're seeing new things, and the job is not to compare one school to the other, and it's
Hmm.
you also want to be careful. You want to be ethical and above board, not to steal ideas. But if as Christian educators we can share ideas or share concepts that we've discovered and just wrestle around certain concepts in the team meetings, in meetings with the school, around dinner the evening after the visit. But I tell you what, another thing that just came to mind were the relationships, that I
Hmm.
built from serving on a team. And then if you ever have the opportunity to serve with someone, for a second time on a team and just continuing that relationship. And now I'll see them at a conference or I'll text them sometimes, kind of in the meantime, just every once in a while, just, it's some good solid Christian relationships have been born out of the accreditation process.
Absolutely. Well, speaking of relationships, I had an opportunity a couple of years back to I would say be your substitute at a meeting. I really didn't know what I was going into, but it was interesting because I think it was in Washington D.C. It was in
Hmm.
this back room
Hmm.
that I got invited to us. And then when I began listening to what the whole purpose in the conversation was, I was like, whoa, wow, where am I? And it was the leaders of the top accrediting agencies in the world.
Hmm.
And that was a really cool experience. Just just to meet those people. Some of them I keep in contact with today. Uh, but to see that, you're it we're at ACSI, you're not in your own echo chamber, but
Mm-mm.
you are very deeply involved with some of the top well-known accrediting agencies, around the world. And I'd love for you to kind of talk about what that experience is about. What are you learning from? Again, these accrediting agencies, many of them are not religious; they're secular in nature. But God has really granted you, ACSI, a seat at the table
Yeah.
to be able to speak to what's happening in the accreditation space, and for you to be able to also be a light to them. So, talk about what you're seeing at that level, whatever insights you can provide, even some key characteristics that you're seeing, regardless of religious affiliation, of strong accrediting organizations.
That's some great insight. And so you're right. You mentioned myself, and then our director of accreditation USA, Jamie Canterbury, and then each, at least in the US, of our divisional accreditation directors have the opportunity to sit on various boards or commissions of some of these partner agencies, whether it's a state-based agency or whether it's a regional accrediting agency or beyond that. And yeah, rub shoulders with the leaders of all of these other leading accreditation organizations that accredit schools around the world. Um, and it gives interesting insight. It also provides visibility to ACSI so that they know that we're listening. We've got a seat at the table. But it also speaks, I think, to the credibility of ACSI because they acknowledge our protocol as a credible accrediting protocol with each of the regional accrediting agencies in the U.S. We've got partnerships and our protocol is recognized for joint accreditation. So we get a seat at the table on these commissions or these committees. And so there are two sides to the coin. The positive is we get to see these trends in education, trends in accreditation specifically. What are people thinking? How are these other accrediting agencies looking to adjust their protocol so that we can be in the loop? But then they ask our input. That's been a positive so far, is they ask our input. And so up to this point, I would say a positive is each of these agencies has still maintained their focus of helping the school focus on their own mission and fulfilling their own mission. And so that has provided a protection for Christian schools thus far, is their own mission, their own documented foundational documents, their statement of beliefs, and like how well are they fulfilling their mission. I've had the opportunity to serve on joint visits with a couple of these agencies. And again, granted, to the credit of the lead agency, they did at least attempt to put a chairperson from, if not a like-minded Christian school, at least a religious private school as the chair,
Yeah.
who did hold that concept in high regard of the school's own mission and helping the school fulfill their own mission. And so there's still a measure of protection there for our schools. And then the fact that we're at the table and can speak into conversations like the one you mentioned to say, okay, these concepts that we're talking would not align with the
Yeah.
mission of ACSI or our schools. And so God's given us the opportunity to speak into that. But the other side of that coin is um, they that we do have to have those conversations. We do have to make sure we're listening to some of these ideologies that might be creeping into these other accrediting agencies, and when they consider should we add a certain element to our standards that might go against the mission of Christian schools, and we can speak to that. And thus far, they've been good to work with us. To make sure, but back to the question of like key characteristics of good accrediting agencies, I'd say it's the focus on the mission. Find the school where they are. We mentioned it earlier in our conversation. Find the school where they are and help them be the best school that they can be in light of their mission and their own context. And so I'd say that is still at the heart of the majority of accrediting agencies. It's just that some would not be missionally aligned, and then some
Yeah.
you might get a chair person leading the team that's not missionally aligned, and so that could produce a stressful situation or not. But oh goodness, I will say this. I just thought of this. I was on a joint visit. It was at one of our leading ACSI schools, and there were 4 agencies on campus at the same time.
Whoa.
4 agencies on campus at the same time, 2 of which were secular or non-sectarian independent school agencies. And we were in a large team meeting. I think of a hotel conference room with, I don't know, 15, 20 people when you count the total number
Wow.
of team members sitting around this table. And one of the team members from one of the other agencies said, well, goodness, I must have heard the term biblical worldview integration multiple times today, and everybody seems to be on the same page here about that. And her point was that they couldn't just randomly throw that together last minute and tell their people, hey, everybody, key word while the team's on campus, biblical worldview integration. Her point was it was ingrained into the culture. It's who the
Yeah.
school was, and it was a true witnessing opportunity that our ACSI school had going through the accreditation process with these other agencies also on campus. And I was so encouraged by that. And so I would say, our schools that are in that situation can use it as an opportunity to be a light to other educators who may come on campus through the accreditation process.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And even kind of build upon that, schools who engage in the accreditation process, who get through it, who become accredited, um, I also see this as there being a light to their community. Of course, just the fact of calling yourself a Christian school, there's always going to be someone who's willing to attack.
Yeah.
And it reminds me of what Peter says. He's like, man, if you're going to suffer, make sure you suffer for good and, be ready to give a reason for what you believe in season and out of season. Just being prepared. And I think a part of that preparation, especially in the realm of education, is Christian schools embracing this process of accreditation and saying, no, listen, we're going to subject ourselves to this evaluation, this assessment that's biblically based and research based standards. And so that if if folks come against us about whether we're actually fulfilling our mission or we're
Mm.
really educated in a high standard, it's like, no, we've put ourselves through this, and here's the evidence of that. So I also see it as it potentially being a witness to our community at large, and of course, all of the other benefits that come along with being an accredited school as well, in terms of parent confidence, et
Mhm.
cetera, on down the line. Well, a couple more things before we wrap up here. Man, talk a little bit briefly about what's new that's happening in ACSI in the realm of accreditation and certification. I know we have some exciting things that's taking place, so feel
Yeah.
free to touch on a couple of those things.
Sure. So I'll do one of each, one in the accreditation realm and one in the certification realm. So, well, I'm going to have to do a couple in the accreditation realm. Um, First in the accreditation realm is for U.S. and international schools going through the Inspire process. We've just this academic year we've launched our new digital accreditation platform, and so it will handle the whole process from application to self-study
Love
to
it.
visit report. Annual reporting after that, and so it's all in the same platform, single sign-on with other ACSI platforms, and so we're really excited about that. We launched that just prior to the fall semester, fall of 25, and so fall of 25 we got to get in there, work, learn how it operated, make some tweaks, and so going into 26, 2026 and beyond, it's really going to be a benefit for our accredited schools. That's one new thing that's here now, and for schools entering the accreditation process and already in the accreditation process. Another exciting thing is for many years, we had our U.S. accredited schools and then international schools that were also accredited. And then for the past several years, we've had a divisional accreditation commission in Latin America. It uses
Mhm.
our protocol translated into Spanish, and they have their own commission to accredit um, uh, schools in Latin America in the Spanish language. Just this year, we launched a divisional accreditation commission in our Asia Pacific division. We launched a divisional commission specifically for our international schools, so dedicated to our international schools. And then the Global Commission approved the creation of a divisional accreditation commission in Africa for our national schools
Wow.
in Africa that will use the accreditation protocol. And so accreditation is expanding globally to try to reach schools in their context with a school improvement process that will meet them where they are and help them improve there. And we've had solid school improvement processes before
Mhm.
in these other divisions with Paths to School Improvement, and then ACSI Europe has the CSIP, and then there are others. But it's exciting that to expand divisional accreditation
Yes.
commissions globally. So we're changing the mindset of the global commission to truly be a global commission, and getting
Mhm.
global input, and attempting to think globally in that regard. So
Yeah.
that's another awesome initiative or change in the accreditation realm. So that's
Very, very exciting.
yeah,
Well, I had an opportunity to, serve on that accreditation visit, like I said, in the fall, and be able to kind of do a test run with the new system. So
sure.
I remember reporting back to you. I was like, Stephen, this is awesome.
Oh, good. Good. Glad to have that review and that vote of confidence. So that's good. That's good. Yeah, I think it will be a game changer for a lot of our schools. New on the certification or credentialing side of things. Again, that's another area where we're trying to get our bearings globally, where each of our global divisions are, a lot of them, most of them have a credentialing process. And so just making
Mhm.
sure that we're all on the same page, missionally speaking, where each division is conducting their own contextualized credentialing process, but making sure it includes key elements for to meet ACSI global core standards. But then we are well on the way to developing an alternative certification track, two different ones.
Mm.
One in the U.S. for teachers who it's specifically designed for teachers who have a degree perhaps outside the field of education. So maybe they're teaching in our
Mm.
Christian schools, they want to be ACSI certified, and so developing a way for them to meet the Bible, the Christian philosophy of education, and then the educational studies, the pedagogy requirements,
Yeah.
in one package, all through
Mm.
ACSI. That's in partnership with Cedarville University, who's contributing content to that, but it will be completed on ACSI's LMS so that they don't have to go out, these teachers don't have to go out to third-party universities and
Yeah.
just try to have courses for credit and hours here. It's an
Right.
alternative track that will be one package through ACSI's LMS. They can enroll, and when they finish on the other side, they'll be issued a standard ACSI certificate. Um, and then Dr. McCullough is working with our team in another global division to develop a leadership track along those same lines. And so we're excited about the possibilities of how that work in each global division can perhaps translate to or impact or
Mm.
benefit other global divisions to create various training pieces, certification tracks, and things like that. So we're real exciting times happening in ACSI accreditation and credentialing, globally speaking.
Well, it's clear, Stephen, that you are doing your best to be, an excellent steward of what God is giving you. You're building upon just a great foundation, that was laid many, many years ago. You mentioned Dr. Aaron Wilcox, who
Mhm.
just did an astounding job
Yeah.
of just establishing our procedures, bringing that level of excellence, and just seeing you continue to build upon that, take us into the future, and also expand us globally. So as we close out, man, you have any encouraging words for our member schools, or anything, for those who are considering the accreditation process or preparing to go through it, whatever the Lord lays on your heart?
Well, I think I would just say if you're a member school who's thinking about accreditation or seeking accreditation, first off, reach out to our team. We'd love to help you. We'd love to speak with you, help you, walk with you through that process. We've got several resources available to schools who are just getting started and then entering the accreditation process. But those who are looking at the self-study and they're just getting ready to start, kind of going back to the whole mindset of accreditation I mentioned before, I would say embrace the process.
Mm.
It can seem daunting looking at all the standards up front. But again, to break it down into manageable steps, get a team around you who can help you with the heavy lift. They don't all have to be administrators. You've got solid lead teachers who can lead a subcommittee or things like that, but involve others. So embrace the process, involve others of your constituency there on campus. And then I would say be authentic, be who you are.
Mm.
When you're filling out that self-study, be authentic
That's
in
good.
in answering in providing the evidence, reflecting, creating the goals for improvement. I said before that some of the best experiences are when both the school and the team itself understood the accreditation process. So if I'm a team member and I get I get a self-study that I read through for before a visit, and it sounds, like a promotional piece. It's all positive and everything's great. And then we show up on campus and have these conversations. It's just the process goes a lot more smoothly if you're authentic in that document.
That's
You're who you
good.
are. You just lay it out on the table. This is who we are. And then the team can come alongside you. And you know what? A bunch of the team members probably were in your exact spot at one point in their career or in their schools, and we're like, yep, we're going through the exact same thing you're going through. So let's talk about it. And then it can be truly a collaborative process. So those are the encouragements that I would give.
Awesome, awesome. Well, listen, to our listeners, if you don't know Stephen Deck, you need to get to know Stephen Deck. He is a great friend and probably one of the most wittiest and funniest
Oh,
people that we know. I think he's the subject of almost every leadership meeting for whatever
oh,
reason, in a very good way. But Stephen, thank you so much for joining me for the podcast, talking about biblical stewardship. I love that whole concept of being authentic, and us just really embracing the process and being fully present, and being good stewards and being faithful where God has placed us. So thank you, Stephen. I know we're going to do this again.
yeah. Thanks, Jerry. It was a fun time. Thanks for having me on.
Grafted Together is a presentation of the Association of Christian Schools International. Learn more about biblical worldview and spiritual formation at acsi.org/graftedtogether.